double check. Yeah, recording seems to be on. Admin, if you can just check for me quickly. Yeah, it has started.
Yeah,
Thank you.
says
Yeah.
recording has started.
Yeah, there we go. Well, there we go. Well, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Let me take my glasses off so I can see the big screen. When I need to start reading, I'll put them back on again. But a very good morning to you, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you along with us this morning. And as well, you, Ray. Ray, you and I have gone back a number of years, and your knowledge in terms of business continuity and business resilience is well known, both in and out of South Africa. So Ray, I'm really looking forward to having a discussion with you around building the resilience of an organization and then threading that into the world that I come from, the corporate governance world. And then very specifically, as we end this session, I want to maybe give the audience a peep at what is called the world's first digital corporate governance framework. Now, that's not my words. Those are the words that have come from SAP at the time. And there's been a lot of significant developments in the development of this corporate governance framework, but I will show that to you later. But what I really want to do now, Ray, is just give you a quick warm welcome, Ray. Your credentials are well known. I'm not going to let the people know about all your background now. That will come out in a series of slides. A copy of these slides will be made available to people after the event. I'll try and get some slides together and just neaten them up nicely. Ray, I see you've sent me a couple of really, really nice slides, so we'll send those out as well. But Ray, maybe let's kickstart the session. We could talk about so much. And just to the audience, I believe there are about 100 or so people that will be coming through today. We, both myself and Ray, we specifically have not, belabored how we're going to approach this particular webinar, but rather said we'd like to have a discussion, talk about, the issues of building the resilience of a business, and then really just coming off the cuff. So nothing has been rehearsed, and I hope that you're going to be able to enjoy the session. Ray, I thought I'd start off by perhaps an article that I read. Oh, no, sorry, I didn't read it. I wrote it, for goodness sake. I wrote an article last week, and the title of the article was something.
I hope you read it as well.
I think I did, Ray.
A lot of mistakes going out.
I did. But Ray, I wrote an article last week on the back end of, this whole amendment to the terrorist and activities amendment bill. And the gist of the article was saying, will this article become outlawed? In other words, the article that I wrote, and Ray, as you know, I write a lot. Will the article become outlawed? Why? Because I am too vocal, say too much, that's maybe not politically correct. And I wonder how much truth is lost when we're being politically correct. But more importantly, if we speak out against corruption, poor leadership, bad governance in an organization. I'll give you an example. If I'm doing the governance of a state organization and I just happen to be doing my job because I see there's weakness in the resilience of the organization, will I be called a terrorist? Now, that sounds absolutely bizarre because I'm not wielding some, AK-47 and operating in the sleuth of the darkness of the night. I'm simply telling you you're not doing your job, or I'm telling you that there is a weakness in your business, and if you don't plug that weakness, you're going to fail. Something will go wrong. So Ray, I wrote this article, and some associates of mine in Canada came back. And they said to me, your article couldn't have been better planned and timed. And I said, well, why? And they said, well, simply Terry, this. They said, there's this whole mass, a mass, what did they call it, Ray, with this professor? Help me out quickly. Mass formation psychosis. And this professor was talking about it. And I sent the link to you, Ray. And it got me thinking, are we actually being sold poor information because somebody told us to do it and they convinced us it was the right thing? And because we're being told and we're not allowed to speak out against our better judgment and not applying our own thinking and good sense and wherewithal, could I get into trouble? So Ray, let's start this discussion around, are we actually applying our minds in our businesses to just what we're doing, let alone the resilience of the business. Your thoughts on this, Ray?
Well, pretty broad question, and I think that you can say it very simply that those people that do apply their minds generally have a higher success rate than those who just wing it as they go, like
True.
this this webinar that we're doing at the moment.
Yeah.
And with regard to actually having an opinion and stating an opinion, it depends on the platform that you use for that opinion. Fact checkers may simply veto or edit out your comments on certain platforms. So there's a lot, and with the media that we have today, there are so many different opinions at the same time.
Mm.
Never has it been more important for people to be able to critically judge the information that they are getting from media. So
It's
it's very important.
authenticity. Mm.
Yes. So it's authenticity, and it's very difficult. Sometimes there are some people who will listen to what is being said, will
Mm.
judge it carefully, will check their own facts,
Mm.
do their own reasonability checks against it, and will in fact analyze it to say, is it technically, and again talking about governance,
Mm.
morally correct?
Yeah.
Um, and then you may find that you've upset somebody along the line, and then there's also the danger of cancel.
Yeah.
You may become cancelled.
Yeah.
So that's
Neutralized.
another
Yeah.
threat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So on the back end of this kind of thinking, the point is, if we don't have, I suppose, credible, reliable, knowledgeable, experienced people in the business who can actually present us the facts and the truth of the matter at hand, that has obviously dire implication to the business, and not in one particular area of the business, but I would argue across all elements of a business, strategically as well as operationally.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um,
So Ray, this is an interesting point. I mean, you and I were you and I have chatted before about a number of areas about governance and what have you. But in the last number of years, that from a CGF, our company point of view, that we've been developing the corporate governance framework and the digitization thereof, we've been one to say that business continuity, which is almost a subset of this discussion, business resilience, but that business continuity in itself is pretty much of a flawed process if it's not being applied through every aspect of the business on a proactive basis. In your experiences, how often is this actually being done, or is it happening, when the pawpaws already hit the fan, so to speak? How you're experiencing this narrative of BCM? Is it
um,
real? Is it really happening, or did COVID wake people up to say, "Oh my gosh, I've got a bit of a problem"? What's your take on that, Ray?
well, I'm saddened to say that if you look at the number of people that have nominally got a business continuity tick in the box,
Mm.
it's a relatively small minority that actually have functional and working business continuity management systems that are kept alive on an ongoing basis.
I
So
like that.
some of
Yeah.
them it's a tick in a box. Some of them it's an earnest attempt at actually building a business continuity management system.
Mm.
But all right, we've built one now, and it's time to move on to other things. So it'll be here on the top of my filing cabinet behind my desk, and I'll pull it out whenever I need it. You go visit the guy again in 3 years' time, and it hasn't moved.
Wow.
It hasn't
So
been updated, and it's got a thickening layer of dust on it.
So I pick up on the word being kept alive. I mean, surely that implies that, I mean, it's like if I've got a pet, right? I'm sorry to use a pet, but if I've got a pet goldfish, I've got to check it's alive. In other words, every day I need to go and feed it. And at least I would imagine once a week, I should go and replace a portion of the water. So why are we not doing the same from a business continuity point of view, which is one aspect of the business's resilience? And I'll come to a thought I have on this now. But why is it not happening? I mean, should we be having more disasters like COVID-19 and Eskom load shedding and now water shedding for us to constantly go back to check that we can actually run our business? Why is it not happening? Are there
There's a
not enough
multitude.
disasters?
Well, there are not enough disasters to keep people's attention. Sometimes the disasters are not close enough to home.
Yeah.
And often, when there are such disasters, the number of fatalities are higher than expected.
Yeah.
But there are success stories. There are people that have done this or have undertaken business continuity, had a disaster, and sailed through the other side and look good. And some of them that have actually come out better and stronger.
So I remember
Uh,
the cases of 9/11 where that actually happened, where, I mean, I don't know the names of the companies. You'd probably be a lot closer to this than what I am. But I mean, companies that, the 9/11 disaster were actually some of them who did have those more proactive, recheck, were up and running 3-4 days later in a different state, which I guess is really, the reasons why one wants to have a proactive approach to checking the resilience of one's business.
well, yes, there are people that do that. And I'll go back to 2013 when a small insurance company, life insurance company that we provided business continuity plans and facilities for, when their building in Braamfontein actually caught fire.
Mm.
And the building was not gutted, but it was so badly coated with smoke and with carbon from all of the
A health
electrical
hazard.
cables.
Mm.
The carbon black that came off all of those burnt cables coated every single workstation in the building,
Yeah.
and you couldn't use them.
Yeah.
So all of the equipment is written off. But the people actually managed to get up and running. They started arriving at work between 7 and 8 in the morning. They were relocated at a recovery center by around 10. By 11 in the morning, they were working.
Wow.
And their call center, which was the main outbound marketing arm that they had, was up and running at 11. It lost 1 hour of productivity or of productive time in
Mm.
that specific day. But
Mm.
the time after that was so telling and so successful, because all of a sudden people who had a plan, whose management now embraced the whole situation and said, look, we've got a bad situation, let's make it work properly.
Yeah.
They suddenly picked up, and we could see sales increasing after the event.
Wow.
Now,
So there should, yeah. Sorry, carry on, Ray. Yeah.
this was a dramatic change from the orderly move that they'd had from their old premises
Wow.
3 months before,
Yeah.
where for 2 weeks in an orderly move, they basically lost all of that turnover during that period.
Yeah.
Yet in the
Yeah.
period after the disaster, because people were so highly motivated to do a good job for the company while
Yeah.
it was under stress,
Yeah. Yeah.
things improved.
Yeah.
Sales went up.
That's phenomenal. We should be hearing more of these case studies, I suppose, in the market, to be able to, I almost want to pinch myself by saying what I'm about to say, to kind of prove why, the proactive stress testing of an organization is just so vitally important. But I suppose, Ray, it also speaks to the agility of the board, surely. I mean, if the board are kind of a reactive, non-responsive board, then I would imagine that business resilience as such, or the, if I may say, the old BCM type of discussion, is not top of mind if it's a non-agile board. What have your experiences been there?
Again, that particular client, a very agile board, owned
Mm,
by a group of investors who were pretty agile themselves.
Mm.
and very serious about the way they did things.
Mm.
So they considered business continuity to be an investment rather than an
Yeah.
expense.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. And
Yeah.
then again, for a lot of people, it's just an irritation. We just
Yeah.
need to get things done. The regulators are onto me for it, or the auditors are onto me for it, or
Yeah.
somebody in the supply chain is irritating me and saying, "Where's your business continuity plan? So can you print one for me quickly? Put my logo on the front, and I can get on with the real life, which is what I do every day. I come to the office and
So
log
Ray,
onto the
this
PC."
so Ray, this obviously, and folks, as you're joining us, and of course this recording will go out no doubt to many more people. But as you're joining us, you're talking to both Ray and myself, Terry Boyson, Ray Stride, and Terry Boyson, around business resilience and how it affects not just the company, but I would imagine where I'm going to go to now, society. So the point, I guess, Ray, is that if we are not looking at, I suppose the bottom line of an organization, the sustainability of an organization, a typical discussion like business continuity management and business resilience, it kind of seems so far away, so far-fetched until the pawpaw hits the fan for you and your business. And in my
Yes and no.
experience, yeah, it kind of feels that way. It depends on, I suppose, the maturity and the agility of the board. But at the end of the day, surely we should be able to have a discussion where we can show how business resilience improves the bottom line to some of the points that you're talking about now, actually bolsters the return on investment. But yet, unfortunately, certainly in our experiences, the topic of governance, and Ray, you can comment on that from a BCM point of view and resilience, is always something that we'll do it when we get time, and it's not most important right now. We're busy going through an audit and what. But how do you link your discussion of business resilience into bottom line performance? And I'll tell you how we're doing it from our side. You go first.
Okay, so firstly, just to go back to something that you said a little while ago, business continuity management is possibly seen, or business continuity is seen as being a little bit old style.
Mm.
Let me just correct something there and say it is still present in resilience.
Okay.
So if you do have this sudden business disruption, you have to be able to recover from it. You
Yeah.
have to have planned for that. You have to have done something to avoid it.
Mm.
Now, where organizational resilience or business resilience comes into it now is that we strengthen and we link a lot of the disciplines together. And the way to tie them together is with a very comprehensive risk management foundation, because there are risks in the area of factory production, which can affect continuity. It's
Sure.
not only a factory production issue, it's a
Yeah.
business continuity issue.
Yeah.
So risk registers now need to become communications methods between
Good
different
point.
parts of the organization. They need to be the internet within the organization that runs across all of the silos.
In other words, we plugged into it.
Yes, you need to
Yeah.
be plugged into it. You need to understand what's happening in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not just a case of saying, hey, we've got all of these risks.
Hmm.
It also, more important than that, is a mechanism for making certain that those risks are addressed.
Yeah.
And that's the key issue. If people address the risks in the risk register,
Mm.
they're making progress. And often that builds teamwork. It identifies other issues in the organization where people are not communicating with each other.
Hmm.
And really, that will get you through those sudden disruptive events when teamwork suddenly becomes
Yeah.
so important.
Yeah.
And
Good.
it's the way of getting everybody talking to everybody else about the real problems.
That talks to, it's interesting, Ray, as you mentioned, some of these points like risk and, now I'll get into the next one now, stakeholder engagement and stakeholder communication, because without plugging, I use the word plug, and I'm going to use that to both my and your advantages now. So I'm going to be a bit naughty on that. But if you can't plug in to the ethos, firstly, something you mentioned earlier on this morning, the ethos of the organization, the ethical, the moral ways of the organization and of its people. If you can't plug in and understand the risks, and if we don't take each and every one of us, whether we're risk officers or compliance officers or governance officers or anybody else, if we don't take some responsibility in these areas, and if we're not plugged in, I mean, we've got disaster coming our way. Every person in
Yes,
the organization owns, I would imagine, a portion of the risk.
yes, there is always a substantial potential for that disaster. And it can be the physical disaster that you're talking about, which occurs, or it could be the long, slow disaster
Yeah, yeah,
of, for those of you who are old enough to remember those movies, what is known as Cool Hand Luke syndrome, or what we have here is failure to communicate.
yeah, yeah, very much so.
Um, and communication is the starting point for
Yeah,
teamwork.
yeah, very so
You can
true.
only work you
Yeah,
can only work with somebody that you can actually speak to.
that's so true. And in my world, I mean, it's not my versus your, but our worlds are integral, and integrally connected. In my world, from a governance point of view, if the tone and the measures and the communications are not coming properly and clearly, effectively and efficiently from the top, which would be the board, essentially you've got mayhem and disaster, dysfunction at the bottom. If there's not that stakeholder engagement and communication, to the
Yes.
risks, amongst other things, of course, but to the risks of the organization.
Yeah.
Ray, so
And
yeah, carry
and
on, Ray.
you have to know what those risks are.
Yeah, and
So,
understand your risk register.
well, not only understand the risk register so much, but take away some of the rules and the influences around the risk register,
Mm,
because very often the risk register becomes restricted, and
yeah,
there's terms like we have a strategic risk register. Well, no,
yeah,
you actually have a risk register, or you should have a risk register, which should include strategic risks.
exactly correct. Yeah,
And
yeah,
the modern approach is actually to make that risk register as comprehensive as you can.
yeah.
One of the ways of doing it is by putting a comprehensive incident management system in
Mm,
place. So
mm,
not just IT ticketing,
mm,
not just incident information security incidents,
mm,
but also include occupational health and safety,
yeah,
production failures,
yeah,
marketing failures, customer
yeah,
complaints.
yeah.
Because every single time you have an incident, it means that a risk came to pass.
Correct.
If that risk is not in your risk register, is it complete? I don't think so.
No, exactly. Ray,
So allow
fascinating.
it to build and don't allow anybody to put restrictions on it.
Yeah. Fascinating discussion. So, Ray, again, so folks, you can see what we're doing. We're blending the two worlds of a BCM, business resilience specialist, and another one in governance. Um, we talk about the tone and the appetite of risk coming from the top, i.e., from the board. And, as I listen to you, Ray, talking now, I just wonder, why if we are charged with the fiduciary duty of protecting the organization, why this isn't a top of mind discussion, not a fearful discussion, but a top of mind discussion on a day-to-day basis, all the key players in the organization, um, particularly as we are charged to looking after the interest and for protecting the interests of an organization. One almost, and I know, Ray, this will make you cringe, but one almost wants to say we should create a law that you have to go and look at your BCM and the resilience of your company and report on it, on a very regular basis to show stakeholders, not just the shareholders, but all vested stakeholders, that the company is in good shape and that it does have, the ability to endure, the smallest and the medium of risks. I'm not talking about, risks that we could never have predicted or understood, but there should be something perhaps a lot more, robustly compelled on boards to making sure that they are at least attending discussions like this, and then of course putting in place the necessary strategic and operational plans to avoid unwanted risk. Ray, your thoughts coming from a fiduciary point of view?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, the fiduciary and the operational should be aligned on that. We
Mm,
need to see all of them.
mm,
We need all of them acted on.
yeah.
And we want to make certain that the outputs or the mitigation actions which
Mm,
come from a risk register
mm,
are not just um, you know trite words and ticks in the boxes. We actually want to see those mitigation actions being executed.
yeah.
We want to see things being maintained.
Yeah.
And again, you can look at something simple. You've got a risk of fire. Yes, we've got fire extinguishers. Don't worry. Are they maintained?
When last were they
Or
checked?
yes,
Do you know how
why
to
is
use
this
them?
why has this one still got a date of 2017 on it?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So really going out there and testing, that all these things work and that people
Yeah,
know how to work it. And I mean, it talks also to the point of things like fire. I mean, you raised fire, and we know that many other types of
that's
risks.
important.
But fire. I mean, do we have a fire warden? Yeah, we do. He was trained last year. Well, he doesn't work with us any longer. Who's the new fire warden? Is this called a
Correct.
fire extinguisher?
And who does his job when he's on leave?
That's true. Yeah, that's
Does it
true.
help if he's working from home?
Well, I'm glad you raised that. Let's talk about that, Ray. Folks, as you can see, we're just having a kind of a fireside chat. Sound like the President of the United States, having a fireside chat. But let's talk about working from home. So, a couple of months ago, I did a very similar talk with a cyber expert, a renowned worldwide known cyber expert, and we were talking about corporate governance and cyber risk, cyber crime. And of course, expectedly, off I went, and I went and got some statistics out, and I found in the latest 2022 report from PwC that cyber risks and cyber crime, 49% top of mind, in terms of the board, top risk, followed by health risks, which was sitting at 46%, by macroeconomic risks at 43%. Macroeconomic, just we hold that one for a minute. Climate change, that's going to become, I suppose, our next big bugbear of risk. And so they carried on. And I sat back and I thought to myself, working from home. So, how have we protected, Ray, our working from home situation from risk? So, for example, if I don't have a clean desk policy at my dining room table at home, or if I've got guests coming through on a weekend and they just happen to mosey through, my dining room, most of us would work from a dining room. How have we changed the nature of our policies and our procedures that worked reasonably well, let's face it, when we were still at the office? But if we're no longer at the office, have we actually changed the workplace office policies to the home-based office policies? Ray, what have you found there? I mean, codes and policies should be changing because they morph. They are not static documents. Are you finding these documents keeping in line with all these disasters, COVID-19, ESCOM, work from home, wear fellies at home, in fact, wear your pantoffles at home, yeah, and you slip at home, can I have an IOD from home on the office because I'm in working hours? Have you seen the change of these policies coming through? Work from home?
No, very few,
So
very few.
how does that affect the resilience of a business?
Okay, I'll give you two examples. It can affect it negatively. So what people are finding now is because you had information security risks
Yeah.
and you had everybody at the office working behind a firewall.
That's true.
So we protected everybody with this marvelous
System.
firewall.
Mm.
We've now sent everybody home, and we've now got 350 people working straight off the internet. So all of a sudden, my footprint has gone from a single large target
Yeah, from 253
to an
to
additional
350.
to an
Yeah.
additional 350 small targets, and that
Yeah.
can make life a
Huge.
little bit tricky. Yeah,
And
I'll
then you
give you.
come and then you come and you secure my PC at home, because I thought this through actually. You asked me this now, did I read my article? Did I think this through? I did. But I thought it's true, and I thought, okay, so you come to my house now and you secure my laptop, and I've got every kind of known antivirus on my laptop,
Yes,
and I've got a fiber coming into my home. But my young son's playing on an Xbox on the same LAN WAN FAN WAN cable. And on his computer, he's a vulnerability surely.
yes,
So it's not 350, Ray. It's 700 if I've got double the number of people on the same fiber system in the same one house. Two, three, four
it's
family members of
it's
the. Am I right?
it's certainly a hell of a lot bigger than one,
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah.
and you probably can't measure it accurately. But I'll give you another one, which is the opposite. So I have one client who runs a small call center, which they use to service the products that they have out in the field. Came COVID, and they took their 20-person um, call center, and they shipped them home. And it started to work pretty well. The call center operators liked it.
Mm.
They gave them all decent fiber or decent internet connections at home. The staff were happy about it because they didn't have to spend quite as much time traveling, and a lot of the staff would have to get into taxis and make 2-3 stops on the way home
And they
to
and they
work
could wear
and
they could wear their slippers and not put the camera on,
yes,
and you'd think they're
that's also
working.
possible.
All right, carry on. I
Yes,
interrupted you, Ray.
but you know that they're working because you can see the number of calls that they're making. The
Sure.
calls are still being
That's true.
recorded, and
That's true.
everything's working pretty much as it was
Yeah.
beforehand. But staff morale has improved. Staff productivity is improved because
Mm.
they don't, you could get extra time out of them
That's true.
quite
Yeah.
easily
Yeah.
because say
Flexible. Mm.
you were sitting on the bus beforehand.
Mm.
Would you mind handling calls at slightly different times? So they've got a better spread of time. The other thing is that they've now reorganized their office into what is known as an agile environment.
Oh, I like
So
that.
they've rearranged it, and this agile working environment is part of organizational resilience as well.
Mm. Mm. True.
And what they've done is they've gotten rid of the disaster recovery contract that they had with the service provider, which said when the office has a problem and we can't use the office, you all pack up and you go to the recovery center. And they
Relocate.
had that
Mm.
relocate. They had that all nicely done.
Mm.
So what's happened now is they've gone from 20 seats to 6 seats at the
Yeah.
office.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Understand.
disaster recovery plan or the business continuity plan looks something like this. When we have a problem at somebody's home where they are doing their primary production, there's a few seats at the office. They can relocate to the office until their home problem is sorted
Ah.
out.
Right. Right. I got
All
it.
right. But I can now also bring people into the office for regular evaluation. So when we bring out new products and we do new things around the office and we change procedures, we can rotate those people through there and
Mm.
train them at the office, and then they
Mm.
can go back home again.
Mm.
And that works pretty
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Perhaps. Yeah. Yeah.
think of the just the straightforward saving of the cost of that recovery contract.
No, absolutely. In fact, also the real estate saving, because a lot of these companies have actually, reduced the size of their real estate footprint. So I know
Well,
I'm very much aware of that. Yeah.
That one's a little simplistic, but what they've done with their office environment is they've built a smaller office environment where they do have fixed seats and fixed offices, but where they've got a lot more meeting space where people can come in and collaborate.
Yeah.
And that is part of business resilience as well. More meeting rooms.
Yeah.
I have a client who have gotten rid of a 250 seat office. They've gone to an office roughly 1/3 of the size.
Right.
And instead of having 250 seats, they now have 40 seats, 20 of which are permanents, 20 are bookable hot desks that you can come in for. Lots and lots of small meeting rooms and 13 boardrooms.
Wow.
But we have to collaborate.
So
And
what
it's a third of the cost.
So well, that's it. And what I'm hearing is that you've got a happier workplace environment, which is no doubt operating more effectively, more efficiently, because people are essentially happier.
Yes.
We got a thing called the happiness index. I don't know if you know about it. We measure the happiness of a society and the happiness of businesses around the world. And South Africa is not very high up on the happiness index. I don't think I need to tell you why not, for obvious reasons. But what you've just described to me, Ray, I think would make the ordinary employee, who is bussing it in, a lot happier if they were able to effectively work on a system where there's a better work-life balance, which is what you've just described.
I will, however, strike a word of caution.
Mm.
That particular company that is reorganized in that way and built their own agile office started with highly professional people, project-oriented, development-oriented, all highly qualified.
And a good board, agile board.
Agile management as well. It works well for them.
Proactively on their risk management.
Correct. There are many organizations where the opposite is true.
Exactly. No, I mean, we see it a lot in our own organization. We see a lot. We see these massive, these monolithic organizations who, quite frankly, can't turn the Titanic at all, even in the open sea, let alone in the harbor. And maybe it's a horrible analogy, but the fact of the matter is that they've got this kind of adage that says, if it ain't broke, we're not changing it. Why change? Everything's working well. Until somebody moves their cheese. You remember that book, Who Moved My Cheese? And I made up a couple of stories around that. I said, well, I moved your cheese. And then I said, well, why'd you move my cheese? And the sequel was, because I can. I can move your cheese. Anyway, folks, we're talking about organizational resilience, and my guest with me is Mr. Ray Stride. He's well known in South Africa and other parts of Africa for business continuity and resilience management of organizations. And I thought it might be a good time just to remind you a definition that Ray sent to me on organizational resilience was, or is rather, the ability of an organization to anticipate, to prepare for, to respond, and to adapt. And I guess adaptation is really the key here, to incremental change. That was fascinating, Ray. Not massive change, but have you seen the little change there and the little change there? And at the end of the day, what comes to my mind is the butterfly effect, the chaos theory. And the definition goes on, have you given the necessary attention to the incremental change and the sudden disruption? My gosh, what a surprise, in order to survive and to prosper. I think what Ray was really saying, in order to be sustainable. And so Ray's world, so to speak, and my world, so to speak, they absolutely connect when we look at the resilience of an organization and how the organization is being directed and controlled, which is the basic definition of governance, Ray.
Yes.
So you're really a governance guy at the end of the day, Ray.
What's the difference?
We're in the same boat, dude. We're in the same boat. So
it's all aimed at keeping the organization alive and healthy
and honest
now, and in the future. Well, simply because honesty, dishonesty could come back and bite you very badly.
It's very true. I think also with the informed stakeholders and the activists that we see nowadays more than ever before, you certainly are getting the feeling that if your company is not behaving well, that people will disbandon you. Oh my gosh. Oh, I've got a thought, Ray. Have you been seeing this thing about Dischem the last couple of days? I mean, they haven't done anything new compared to all the other AAA corporates on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. They were applying BEE, I think a little bit too late. But I mean, have a look at what's happened. People are saying if you've got this one-sided racist theory about only employing and retaining people of color, and white people must no longer be able to work there, I'm going to disinvest with you. I mean, come on, man. Talk about a democracy.
Yeah.
What's your view
And
about that? Or is that a harsh
well,
one, Ray?
it's an economic democracy, because the question you got to ask yourself is, are those people who look at that going to continue to buy your products? And that's the most telling democracy of all.
Absolutely. Look
Uh,
at social media. I mean, the guys in nanoseconds are saying, I'm not buying from you any longer. White and black people. I'm not buying from you.
well,
This is a democracy, for goodness sake.
yeah, I mean, there's parallels in the polony industry as well.
Mm, true. Do you want to share?
No, thanks. I don't eat the stuff anymore. Oh, sorry.
Talking about the Poloni company. But Ray, what does Warren Buffett say about reputation being priceless? He says, and I'm going to kind of bastardize, if you don't mind, Warren, the quote. He says it takes 20 years to build your brand and your reputation and your credibility. And he says it takes 5 minutes to destroy it. I mean, talk about business resilience. You build a company for 20 darn years, and in 5 minutes you destroy it because of bad publicity, bad social media. And I'll take that further and say, it can take one person to destroy the credibility of the organization. And Warren Buffett concludes by saying, and if you can think about that, maybe your actions will change. Ray, your view about that?
There's this absolutely fantastic case study. Anybody remember the disaster that BP had in the
Oh, yeah.
Mexican
Yeah.
Gulf?
Texas. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
When the pipeline burst, and when
Mm, mm,
their drilling rig caught fire,
yeah.
and the CEO of all people went out and said, we have the highest standards. We concentrate on
Mm,
corporate governance and all
mm,
of these issues. And
mm.
after all, it's only a very small burst pipeline, and it's a very large ocean.
Yeah. I mean, it's just bizarre,
Um,
right?
and
Just,
and they did have a very, very rigorous corporate governance program. For instance, you could get disciplined back at head office for walking with an uncovered cup of coffee from the coffee machine back to your desk.
I think they
So
learned
they
that from
had,
McDonald's.
I
I'm
don't know,
being
but
naughty.
it so around the office there were all of these
Yeah.
occupational health and safety rules that were applied rigorously. But don't mess with our rigs. People are professionals on
Yeah.
the rigs, and they will
Yeah.
get on with work, and don't mess with them.
But
And
Ray,
guess where the disaster happened?
yeah. But Ray, in a
And
more
the
serious,
cost and the cost and the
yeah.
cost
Yeah.
The cost,
Yeah.
the cost at the end of the day appears to be northwards of 69 billion US dollars plus reputation.
Yeah, that's true. Ray, it makes me think also of this case the other day of Glencore. And I can't share too much, unfortunately, but I will talk to you about what was in the public domain. Um, Glencore, let's just say, had an indiscretion of 100 million US dollars, which was tied directly into corruption. That is in the public domain, so I'm allowed to talk about it. And after the regulators had finished with Glencore, they were fined 1.3 billion US dollars. So there are 2 points I'd like to make on the basis of this part of the discussion is that policies and codes pasted, and that's me just being a bit, facetious perhaps, policies and codes pasted onto your wall, particularly when you see them in the boardroom walls or you see them at the reception where guests arrive. That's my one point. And the other point is where the fines don't exceed the rewards. This poor governance will continue infinitum, and business resilience will become more difficult to contain as more people get away with not truly applying their mind to good governance and ethical leadership. And although I don't want to go all negative in this particular webinar, the fact of the matter is that we've been doing this for eons, for years. The question is, when will we see people being held accountable where there are proper consequences, where I damage an organization and its reputation, where I exercise poor judgment in social environments? So just the consequences are just lacking, just generally
Yeah.
lacking. And while
Well,
that continues, and while some of us have got deeper pockets than others, we'll just continue perpetuating this poor governance. And to hell with our company and business resilience and continuity. If it happens, it happens. That's pretty much the attitude we're coming across. And the
yeah,
attitude seems to become more brazen, notwithstanding all these new laws and the King codes. I mean, who cares about the King codes? I'm talking South Africa. And the Canadian code. I mean, look at the leaders themselves in government. They feel squat.
there may be a time coming fairly shortly
Oh, please.
where somebody who damaged um, his his company's reputation, inflated profits, pocketed a whole lot of personal money on the back of these inflated profits. And then when it finally collapsed, who are the people who really suffer? It was staff,
Yeah,
it was
employees. Yeah.
suppliers, it was shareholders, it was pensioners who had
Yeah.
investments in that lot. And yeah, soon to be
I
star of stage screen and
can't wait.
Steinhaus. So
Can't wait. I mean, we've seen one or two
it
cases, but
must be,
yeah,
justice must be seen
to
to
be
be
served.
done.
Yeah, you're
Yes.
quite right, Ray. But Ray, you and I, and folks, we're going to get into a quick demonstration of the governance framework, and we're going to pull it together in terms of the resilience coming up of the organization. But Ray, just to quickly conclude on that point, we haven't seen enough cases of real high-profile people who have been, purposefully, going out with selfish, intention and greed. We haven't seen enough of these cases around the world, not just South Africa, but around the world actually been taken to task, sadly. But yeah, so the case of Glencore, the damage, and this was very encouraging as far as I was, as far as I was concerned, the damage was 100 million USD. All right. But the fine was what originally was 1.5 billion. And they kind of watered it down to 1.2, 1.3 billion US dollars. I was encouraged by that. And I think if we see more of that happening to the same perpetrators, I don't want to just see it once for this one and once for that one. I want to see all of them lining up, in front of the firing squad and literally, face the music and be put into jail and to be fined like nobody's business. And then I think we might see, a change now in the moral fabric of our society. But until then, while these guys keep on doing what they're doing, can't see change. Ray, some quick thoughts before I go into a quick demo around business resilience. So you chat quickly, and I'm going to pull up a demo screen. If there's anything you want to maybe share with us as I quickly go into a share mode. I hope you
Yeah.
guys are enjoying this discussion.
One of the things that is important if you want resilience or governance or any of these good disciplines that you want to put in, and it doesn't matter whether one's talking about risk management, business continuity management, cyber security, occupational health and safety, it really doesn't matter that much. But what you've got to be able to do there is you've got to get your teams to be able to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And there's a gentleman known as Professor David Denyer from Cranfield University in the
Yeah.
UK. And he's actually designed a set of quadrants or identified a set of quadrants. So you've got people with different objectives within an organization.
Mm.
So there are people who like to adapt and innovate. So those are the developers. There are those people that like to get things running nice and smoothly. So the performance optimizers. Those people that try and identify problems so that they can fix them. So, and that's called mindful action. And
Mm.
then there are hopefully not just the auditors, but sometimes you end up with the risk managers and the governance officers in this group who apply preventative controls.
Yeah,
Tensions will build up between those people,
the
and
four quadrants. Yeah. Mm.
and you need those people to be able to work together.
Yeah.
And the trick is, how do you get them to all focus on the correct problem and develop a solution which works going forward?
Yeah. Where
Old,
where where the
old
yeah,
teamwork,
carry on. Mm.
old teamwork techniques work.
Dynamics. Yeah.
And the other thing that gets you there is leadership.
Yeah.
It's business leadership.
Yeah.
If you have to be pushed, that's not a leader.
Yeah. Quite right. In
If you
fact,
have to be pulled, that's not a leader
it's
either.
also,
But
yeah, very much so.
but if the leader is the one who says,
Motivates.
I think we should go in this direction, and everybody says, yes, that's a good idea. Let's move on it.
On that point, Ray, so I've just got a very small demo slide screen at the moment.
Yeah.
I'll come to it. No. But on that point, Ray, all four of those quadrants are critical for business if it is to survive. And there are and always will be tensions. And from a governance perspective, particularly in the boardroom, we often talk about dissenting opinion. And a lot of people may see dissenting opinion as something negative. And I think we need to maybe not now, but at maybe another session we can maybe do another show like this. But we need to appreciate the fact that we won't always see things the same way. So long as we're all moving in the right direction or the same direction, rather, let me put it that way, that we can listen to the critics in our boardrooms, in our management structures, and that those critics are doing it for the purposes of not only serving and protecting the organization, but ensuring the organization's sustainability. In a different word, making sure that the organization is resilient, that it can withstand the storms. I often remember people talking about the ships or the sailing boats. They look very pretty while they're in the harbor, but until such time that they're put into the real seas, the real test of its durability has not yet been done. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Ray, I know you haven't seen this for quite some time, and probably not the audience both now and the ones that will receive this recording. But what I've done here is I've stripped out the names, dates, places, and all the sexy stuff. It's not on the screen in front of you, but it really talks to the heart of this discussion. It looks to every single component of a business, whether you're operating in a profit, non-profit, listed, unlisted, local, or international, and you can see the dimensions of all these different governing elements. And we've been talking about these, well, not all of them, but quite a few of them, in fact, this morning. We were talking about the agility of the board, and then I kind of made the remark about policy sitting on the wall and not being dynamic. Okay, and that would come out over here. So every one of these governing elements are all interconnected. And so when there is a change by way of people doing their normal work, and we're talking about stakeholders this now, which you'll see coming over here, their normal work in the course of a day, all the work that they do and the documents that they're working by and according to, even the strategy and all forms of operation and risk management, every single component of the business has been pulled together in what we have called the corporate governance framework. It's a registered trademark. We're pretty well known for this around the world and indeed in South Africa. And Ray, you would see to much of your delight the business continuity element sitting over there. Rah,
Yes.
rah. Yeah. And it's not isolated, Ray, from my earlier comment now, because whatever's going on in, let's say, for example, business reporting, you can see it has a link to BCM. And whatever's happening in the boardroom, it has a link to BCM. And whatever's happening in operational performance would have a link to reporting, and a reporting from those two components to standard quality management, right down to the wellness and the health of organizations. So every one of these elements are all interconnected. And as the organization is doing its duties day by day, all right, so the framework is denoting the reds, the ambers, and the greens to denote the various state of compliance, and it's extended compliance, not compliance only with law, but compliance to everything that the organization stands for, including its policies and its procedures and so forth and so on. And then at the end of the day, and I did promise this would only be a very quick demo. So if anybody is interested in more about this digital governance framework, they're welcome to come back and we'll take it offline and have a separate session. But what is fascinating is that, you remember you say, what can't be measured can't be managed. Now, let me just make this a bit smaller so you can see what I'm talking about. What can't be measured can't be managed, and what can't be managed can't be measured. And so we can measure and manage every single component of the business in a so-called real-time status. Now, what does this mean in real terms? Well, Ray, what it means is that I can see where I was a month ago in this company in terms of the governance, risk, and compliance, and the appetite and tolerance of risk and compliance coming from the board and management. I can see where I was a month ago. I can see where I want to head to in a week or a month or a year from now. But even more importantly, I can compare one organization's entire governing from one company to another, anywhere in the world. Isn't that phenomenal? And Ray, just for you again, just to make your heart very happy, as you can see, Uh, and this framework has been designed over many, many years. There is no other digital framework doing what this one is doing, but as you can see, right smack bang in the operational side. So the whole bottom of the framework is all the operational areas of the business, and the top half, which speaks to the entire bottom half and top half, the top area is all the accountability of the board and the strategic direction that the organization takes. And obviously, all ultimately driven by the board and the committees of the board. Fascinating. So I did say that I would give a very quick demo. That was very, very quick. I mean, there's so much more in this particular demonstration. But Ray, that just gives you hopefully some joy, and not just hope and inspiration, but some joy in terms of how governance has moved well beyond a tick box exercise and well beyond some kind of integrated report which companies produce once a year to promise and to tell you that everything is fine. We got 2 minutes, Ray. Over to you, sir.
Terry, I agree. And I have a presentation around all of this, which I sent you some slides of, but one of them was Peter Drucker, the famous,
Yeah.
yeah, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So the first thing about actually being able to measure and manage is to say, what is it?
Yeah, name it. Yeah.
How do I measure it?
Yeah.
Why am I measuring it? What is a good size for it?
Yeah.
And what is a bad size?
Yeah. You're quite
And
right.
that requires people to ask sometimes some searching questions.
Critical
Um,
questions. Quite right. Yeah. And
and
it
and
comes.
and if there's a need to avoid those questions for some personal reasons, we're not
Yeah.
going to get to the truth.
And Ray, it comes all the way back to this kind of critical thinking and where that Professor Matthias Dius, I think his name was. You remember the name I'm talking about. I'll get the names right later,
Yeah.
and I'll send you the copy of the webinar. But he says, whilst we still have the ability to speak out and to apply critical thinking,
Yes.
there is still
we
hope.
must do so continually
And conscientiously.
Yes.
Ray, it's been a fascinating discussion with you. So I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I have.
Yeah, I have. Thank you, Terry.
So Ray, yeah, really a pleasure. And it's been really super catching up with you again. Ray, I hope that this will be one of many more with you and I. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now bid you all farewell. And at the end of the last person leaving this webinar, I'll then stop the recording, and then I will make sure that I send through a series of slides. Ray has also been kind enough to send me a good number of slides. Thanks, Jackie. And I'll make sure you get a copy of these slides. And if you'd like to make a contact with either myself or Ray, the contact details will be on those slides as well. I'll also make sure that you get an unedited version of this recording. And if there's anything that you guys would like to come back to us on, you're most welcome to doing so. So from that, Ray, I bid you farewell, Ray. Thank you so much. And Ray, you remember those days of Mr. Kowalski? I think you're old enough like me to remember it. If I don't see you through the week, I'll see you through the window. On that note, folks, goodbye and have a lovely day.
Guys.
Take care. Cheers then.
Thanks.
Cheers, Bruce. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Yeah, cheers, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Jackie. We still got Shimmy with us. Shimmy, thank you. And Tabisile, still with us. And now I'm going to quickly stop the recording.